Inside the 11 Alive Plus Streaming Center by our very own Doug Richards, who has spent many years covering Georgia politics, covering Georgia civil rights activists. And Doug, we know that you have covered the Reverend Jesse Jackson along the way many times. I wonder, to start here, what memories do you have of Jesse Jackson here in Atlanta?
Well, I mean, the funny thing about it was I did not have a personal relationship or particular rapport with him, but every time I saw him in Atlanta, he would always be like, "Hey, good to see you again," like he knew me. And, I mean, possibly because I fit a lot of generic sort of descriptions, but he was always, I mean, I think it was part of his ability to make himself available to people like us, and he was in Atlanta an awful lot, during, not just during Andy Young's administration, but during Maynard Jackson's administrations, and all the, just all the way up through the, the penultimate moment in Atlanta when the Democratic Convention took place here in 1988. I mean, I remember being at Morehouse College one day. I had talked with Young in a building. We had both come outside. There were people arriving for an event. An SUV drives by and the window in the back rolls down, and Jackson sticks his arm out the window and goes, "Andy, Andy."
And you guys, I mean, you were there to see all of that.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool.
I think this is a good time. We spoke with Ambassador Andrew Young just a little bit earlier today. Andy Young delivering these remarks on the passing of Jesse Jackson.
Well, I met Jesse Jackson in 1965, and it was right after a group got beat up on the bridge at Selma. And I was trying to keep people back, because when people get into an emotional state like that, they get what we call freedom high. Yeah. And they wanted to keep on charging the police. And so we were trying to get everything calmed down. And I'd been up a couple of days, and this great big good looking kid comes up and says, "You look exhausted." I said, "I am exhausted." And he said, "Look, you need to go get some sleep. I can man this barricade." And I didn't even ask him any more questions. I said, "Help yourself." And I left and went to get a nap. But that's the way Jesse Jackson was. He was always stepping up. If you needed a leader, he'd step into it. And he'd have insight, he'd have a commitment.
Remarks from Ambassador Andrew Young delivered earlier today, looking back on his decades of civil rights activism alongside Jesse Jackson, joined again by Doug Richards here. Doug, you've covered both the politics of our part of the country, and so often those politics are interwoven with the push for civil rights and civil rights activism in our part of the country, and centered, of course, right here in Atlanta. When you look back on all of that, what stands out to you? How do you make sense of this long, decades-long, some would say centuries-long interweaving of politics and civil rights activism?
Well, I mean, the funny thing is how long it took for example, Selma was in 1965. It took 19 years for Jesse Jackson to run for president after Selma, after the, killing of Dr. King, obviously. And actually, I was working in Nebraska and covered the Iowa caucuses in 1984, and Walter Mondale and John Glenn and Gary Hart were the sort of mainstream Democratic candidates trying to get caucus votes in Iowa. And then all of a sudden Jesse Jackson decides to weigh in. And I'd never met him before, and started attending his events, and they were remarkable because the other guys were so predictable, and Jesse Jackson was so lit up from his background as a preacher, and it was and he liked to mess around with voters and with journalists, and like he showed up in Des Moines. He goes, "Well, here I am in Des Moines," sort of.
And you saw that. I mean, he seemed relatable. He seemed.
Yeah.
Doug, I want to ask you this question. We're a little short on time, but you cover politics. You spend a great deal of your time under the Gold Dome here in the state legislature. I know you were talking to your sources today as the news broke of the passing of Jesse Jackson. What are people at the Capitol saying as they heard this news today?
Well, probably the most heartfelt character there today was Al Williams, who's a state representative from Liberty County, the town of Midway. There was in Liberty County in the 60s a voting rights sort of classroom that got set up called Dorchester. And Jesse Jackson showed up there when Al Williams was a kid, and Dr. King would also show up when Al Williams was a kid. And Williams, talking about it today, was, very thankful that Jackson showed up, got interested enough in the civil rights movement to try to pick it up after, of course, Dr. King was gone, run for president, and then eventually, gave Jackson credit for paving the way for Barack Obama to get elected. And, it's an emotional day for a lot of people.
Or Doug Richards bringing us that historic perspective on a life that played out in the public eye across the country, across the world, and right here in Atlanta. Doug, we appreciate it.